Hello, welcome everybody to the Extra Point Podcast, our second episode this week. And for the first time, and only two times, we have the full crew here. We have Adam Levin to go along with Dan Schneider. Schneier, I don't even know how to pronounce your name. That's a great start. Who's joining us, who missed last week because he had a bunch of other obligations. And then Eddie Paskal as well, and then I am Andrew Goldberg. I guess I'm a default host, but we're all pretty equal around here. So boys, how are we doing tonight?
Doing
Good.
well, man. Doing well.
Yeah, so you guys can tweet at us. You can tweet at me, Andrew Goldberg, at GoldieBerg. You can tweet at Adam Levin, at Blue Collar God. You can tweet at Dan Schneier, at Dan Schneier NFL. And you can also tweet at Eddie Paskal, at Eddie Paskal. A lot of it's pretty simple. So you could tweet at us any questions, anything you like, anything you hate. But this is the second episode, and we are underway in the NFL season. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to talk about football because of the Ray Rice suspension. I don't know if anyone's heard, or you've been away from a computer, or you've been away from just anything, but Ray Rice has been cut by the Ravens after new video from TMZ has come out. The video is very graphic of him hitting his fiance, now wife, because they got married the day after, I guess, the whole entire press conference and everything. But you visibly saw him hitting her, and then her falling to the ground, and her laying there, and him kind of treating her like an animal. It was very, very graphic, very sad. Now it's just snowballed into just a whole mess for the NFL. Now, new AP report has come out that the NFL, after denying that they hadn't seen the video until it was released Monday, they now say that it was actually released, or that an NFL executive had seen it before. And I mean, guys, this is crazy. I mean, what do you like? The biggest thing for me is, yeah, Roger Goodell should get the blame. I mean, he should absolutely get a lot of blame. But how do the prosecutors and the police not get blamed? They saw this video. They saw a man hit a woman, which is a crime, and they just let him walk. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, Dan, you can go first, being the newbie. We'll break you in here, but I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that what you said is definitely correct here. It's a pretty ridiculous situation. But I kind of see it from a different point of view. I kind of like what Chris Canty had to say. He's currently a Raven. He was formerly a Giant. That's where I knew him from. He was always an outspoken guy in the New York media. And what he said was that it's really wrong of TMZ to put the video out there for everybody to see because it brings up emotional distress for that woman who obviously got hit, even though she, went on to marry Ray Rice after that, and also for the future children of Ray Rice and that woman. I'm sorry, I don't even know her name, and they already have a child. So one day,
Janae Palmer.
I'm sorry.
Her name's Janae Palmer, and then
Yeah,
obviously
Janae
when
Palmer.
she married, it's Janae
Yeah.
Rice.
I mean, one day that child's going to see this video, and it just seems very unnecessary that that child will ever have to see this video. To me, I don't really know who TMZ is. I don't know why they feel like they can just put all this stuff out. This goes back to like the celebrity leaks from weeks ago. This is none of their business. This is people's personal business, and I'm just not a big fan of that. When you deal with the actual issue, now that we know it, now that it's out there, now that we're all debating it because it's for the public apparently to debate. Yeah, it's a horrible situation because it's irreprehensible behavior to hit a woman like that, to hit anybody like that, really, especially a defenseless person. And if Roger Goodell and the NFL knew about this, and if the police knew about this, like you said, and they overlooked it, that's also another problem that we have to look at. But this kind of dates back to when it started, when Roger Goodell only suspended Ray Rice for 2 games. When you look at that suspension, a lot of it had to do with the fact that Ray Rice was the face of the franchise for the Ravens. Yes, he was coming off a terrible year last year when he got a little overweight, didn't run as well, the offensive line had issues, but for a while he's been the face of that franchise. Goodell was hoping to just hide behind him as the face of the franchise and pretend like nothing happened, and I think that's the biggest problem right there.
Yeah, so
Um,
let me throw it to you, Adam. So, obviously Dan brought up some great points. A lot of emotional distress, coming up from not only for Janae to have to relive it essentially, because everybody who clicks it is essentially, it's like more emotional distress on her. So, how much blame do you put on TMZ? How much of the blame do you put on Roger Goodell, Ray Rice, the prosecution, the police? And also, I'll throw it back to you, Dan, after Adam answers, but, what should happen to Goodell right now?
Well, I don't really blame TMZ. I mean, TMZ has been, ironically, the moral compass in this. I mean, if this video doesn't come out, Roger Goodell's not in trouble, and this isn't happening to Ray Rice. I mean, let's just be honest. Like, Greg Hardy of the Carolina Panthers, if his allegations are true, had a much scarier domestic abuse case. No video, not this kind of a punishment. Video is the only thing that's going to garner that kind of a reaction, and it was a good thing. The only person who's suffering in this is Janae Palmer. Everybody did wrong. Ray Rice did wrong. The league did wrong. Goodell did wrong. And the league is really showing its stripes. I mean, if this is true, then, I mean, what's to say the league hasn't done this before? The league has always been, in a way, very good at doing business. Sometimes comes off as cold and calculating to players. But this is bad. I mean, this is just seemingly a complete lack of compassion, caring, or anything for any kind of domestic abuse. I mean, domestic abuse has happened a lot in this league, and guys come back, and, the NFL might just be doing this for PR reasons. I mean, it's a very, very interesting issue that this video has brought out, and, TMZ doing this, I mean, they don't broadcast games. Therefore, to them, they can do this kind of stuff. And you know what? Sometimes ugliness like this has to come out as the truth, even though it is sad that Janae Rice would have to relive that because of this. It was absolutely necessary in terms of this happening. And Goodell is not that much different from the league, society, or even the legal system's perception of domestic abuse, which is a lot of times it's not handled the way it should be. Goodell's not alone in that. But look, you're not going to fire owners, so Goodell's going to be the fall guy. And if there's one thing the league hates, it's bad PR. And if this bad PR continues, he's gone. The league essentially doesn't need him. They'll find him expendable if they keep getting big bad PR like this.
Yeah, so Dan, do you think he'll either be forced to resign? I mean, the NOW, National Organization of Women, came out and said that they think Roger Goodell should resign. There's a lot of pressure now with this new AP report, especially with him either ignoring the fact that an executive heard, got this voicemail and, they saw the video and they either didn't tell him, which is, a lot of disorganization, or, the fact that he knew about it and just, like you said, just decided to brush it under the rug.
Yeah, so pressure is not something that's nothing new to Roger Goodell. He even went on record 2 nights ago on Monday Night Football on an interview or on one of the breaks and said, listen, I've been under pressure for a while and I'm not going anywhere. The fact of the matter is all these organizations can team up and say what they want to say, but a lot like the situation with the Redskins and their team name, in the end it doesn't come down to these organizations or the court of public opinion. It comes down to the owners. And the owners will have to decide if they want to vote him out and vote, and that will be their decision. And in the end, he works for the owners. And technically, it seems like he's been making them a lot of money. As you obviously know, the NFL at this point is a $10 billion plus dollar revenue source for this country. It's an incredible source. But the fact of the matter is, it's not even just my opinion. I saw Steve Gallo, NFL, tweet this today, and it was a great tweet. Really, fantasy football and gambling have been the reason for the boom in the NFL. But we'll give the credit to Goodell, and I'm sure the owners will too in the end, and I doubt that he'll be voted out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was Ed Werder who tweeted it. I'm sure you guys had seen it, but that he, they need a 2/3 vote from the owners in order to kick Goodell out. And considering how much money that they're making, I mean, the Bills sold for $1.4 billion. And they're the Bills in Buffalo.
But is that because of Goodell, though? I mean, I don't mean to interrupt. Is that because of Goodell, though, Dan and Andy, or is that because the NFL is just so big that it doesn't matter who's running that thing, it's going to make money? Gambling, fantasy football, it's going to make money. And I just feel like if enough bad press comes and they got to have a fall guy, it's going to be Goodell. It's not going to be them. And they can easily vote him out if they feel like this is bringing too much bad press. And in week 3, we're still talking about this. I could see him out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because a lot of the owners are starting to come out and kind of say they support Roger Goodell and that he didn't really do this like Bob Kraft did, and he was on CBS before this interview aired. Woody Johnson just released a statement. You can read that on the Star Ledger, New Jersey, New York newspaper. So, I mean, it really comes down to dollars and cents. And, Dan, I'll throw it to you for the last one before. Let's actually go into the Bills sale real quick. But, I'll throw it to you for the last comment.
I think we've said pretty much at least all that I want to say on this topic.
Yeah, so, I mean, all in the end, the NFL has – I mean, all of us are still going to play fantasy football, gamble, watch NFL. I don't think that much is going to change, but they have a severe, severe, severe black eye on the shield, if you want to say. So let's talk about, because we're talking about money and owners, let's talk about the Bills getting sold. The Bills, presumably, were sold, reached an agreement with Buffalo Sabres. Terry Pegula, who is the owner for them, sold for $1.4 billion. And now it looks like that they will be staying in Buffalo, which is great news for Buffalo, great blue-collar city. With the owner they want, fans were rejoicing, especially with the whole Ralph Wilson dying, a beloved owner in the Buffalo area. So what do you guys make of that? I mean, I cover the Buffalo Bills for, Fox Sports, for our division. You guys cover the other teams in other divisions. Everyone just loves this move. They didn't want Bon Jovi. No way, no how. Donald Trump's great name, but I don't think they wanted him either. Terry Pegula kind of goes in line with who they are as a city of Buffalo in terms of the blue collar, like I said. But what do you guys think about it? Eddie, let's throw it to you.
Well, I think it's a good call. I mean, obviously the people of Buffalo are excited that they're keeping their team. I think the NFL is probably pretty happy that Buffalo's staying. And, what it comes down to is, I know everyone says this, but he's said he's committed to bringing a winner to Buffalo. And as a fan base, that's all you can really ask out of your ownership group, is to be committed to winning and being committed to bringing positive results to your team. And, granted, we'll see what he does in the coming months and coming years, but, he said the right things, and he wants to bring a winner to Buffalo. So I guess in that regard, it's a win for him. Obviously, it's a good business move, and it's a good win. It's a win for upstate New York too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe they miss out on the chance of going to LA or Toronto, but hey, they have a really strong base in Buffalo, and maybe with the whole movement and getting Sammy Watkins, and they're also 1-0. Which is great, and we'll get to that in a second. But hey, they're things are kind of looking up in Buffalo. Dan, what did you think of the move?
Yeah, I mean, I've been up there to upstate New York a bunch. I've grown up in the tri-state area. Lived here my whole life. Used to go up there to Albany for New York Giants training camp. I can tell just being there, they have a great group of fans, and more importantly, there's just a good history with the Buffalo Bills that it would be sad to see it go to waste. What you see from sports is that you really never know when things will turn around. Obviously, Seattle Supersonics had a great fan base, and then they was snatched away when they moved to Oklahoma City and became the Thunder. And within a few years, you had Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, and the rest was history. The Buffalo Bills really aren't too far away from relevance again, as you can see by the first weekend when they upset Chicago in Chicago, which I actually predicted on another podcast. They have a really strong group in the trenches on both sides of the ball, on the defensive line and offensive line. And really, I think that's the best way to build before you find the quarterback. Is E.J. Manuel the answer? I don't know. We don't really know yet, but they're giving him what they need around him. So I'm really happy that that fan base has a good group, a good core, and now hopefully a good owner.
Yeah, and that was weird, especially going into week one, actually, because they had signed Kyle Orton, who had retired from the Cowboys, and then they signed him for $5 million, which is a lot of money for a backup quarterback. And then Adam Schefter had reported that, Bills management or the coaches were not afraid to pull the trigger should E.J. Manuel, their first-round pick and their second-year quarterback, they wouldn't be afraid to pull the trigger and bench him, which is, I mean, if you're going to run a franchise, that's probably not the best way of doing it, to just defeat your rookie quarterback. But, Adam, let me throw it to you, because I know you live in L.A. You guys are craving for an NFL team. Was there any reaction, positive, negative, to the fact that, like, hey, the Buffalo Bills are going to stay there? Like, were you guys thinking that maybe Buffalo would be one of those teams to come to LA?
I mean, you heard it. Here in LA, we're teased with this team is coming and that team is coming, and we're some people tell us we're just a bargaining chip and we're more valuable as a bargaining chip. I don't know if the Buffalo Bills would have necessarily been like a sexy option in LA. I mean, yeah, they had O.J. Simpson, who was great at USC, but Buffalo, it doesn't resonate with somebody who lives on the West Coast. I know this growing up on the West Coast. Probably a team like the Raiders, or, yeah, I don't know, even the Jaguars, because they're newer, would maybe, but maybe not even them. Maybe even the Raiders or Chargers moving to LA would be a better move in terms of like LA being excited. But I mean, from the angle that you guys were talking about, I mean, I think it is good that they keep it in Western New York. I mean, it is amazing it's sold for that much. It speaks to the power of the NFL or just pro sports in general. I mean, the Clippers sold for $2 billion. I just think that that's the best place to get money. To put in money if you're a rich person, and if they keep in Western New York, that's great. I mean, hopefully they can get revenue there with a new stadium. I know it might not necessarily be the easiest market to make money, but they do have a loyal fan base, and those people do deserve to have their team there. Yeah. If they can keep the teams in Sacramento in the NBA, they can keep the Bills in Buffalo.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have a very passionate fan base, and in the 90s, I mean, they were one of the best teams in the NFL. They made the Super Bowl 4 years running. I mean, granted, they lost every single Super Bowl, but to make it 4 years and to go back to back to back to back after losing, I mean, that's incredible. And they have Hall of Famers. They got a nice history. Granted, they haven't played well the last 10, 15 years, but, things are looking up. And I think if they had moved from Buffalo, it wouldn't have been a humongous deal, but it would have been something that was like very eye-popping to the public and to the fan base there. So let's actually recap Week 1. We'll start with the Bills because they might have pulled off the upset of the week, taking down Chicago in overtime, 23-20. I mean, to me, that was a really big shocker. I didn't think they would do that. I mean, I have in our predictions last week, which Dan wasn't here for, maybe he'll just run down his predictions if we want to, in the AFC North. I actually thought the Bears would win the AFC North over the Packers because I still don't trust that Packer defense. Not that the Bears might be that much better, but I really like the offense, and Jay Cutler might be there for a full year. But that was a really big, shocking upset for me. I mean, what was your big takeaway from this past week? Let's go to Eddie first.
Is that Adam or Eddie?
Eddie, sorry.
Eddie. I think just for my division, for the NFC West, I think the biggest takeaway for me, I guess it was kind of twofold. Well, twofold, I'd say, is one, I didn't think that the Seahawks were going to come out and play as well as they did. I thought they were going to win that game over the Packers. The 12th man is obviously a lot to overcome, but the way they did it, they looked really good. There was no, the supposed Super Bowl hangover. And so the way they handled business on Thursday night, I thought was very impressive. And I guess my other takeaway from the division would be kind of how well the Niners performed, kind of under the circumstances and everything that's kind of been swirling around with them. I know they've been going through a lot of stuff both on and off the field, and with rumblings of Jim Harbaugh, quote unquote, losing his locker room, and however much you want to make of that. But yeah, the way they kind of came out and took care of business with the Cowboys, I thought was also my biggest takeaway from along with the Seahawks from the division.
Even though the Cowboys may have historically the worst defense ever, even like
I mean, I think that you can't. It's hard to discount, kind of off the field locker room turmoil type of stuff. I think that, they say half the game is mental or whatever, and I think that that's true. So I don't know. I just thought that the way they performed was impressive, and considering everything that they've been dealing with the past week or so here, and I guess actually into the off season.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly helps when Tony Romo throws 3 picks, just, throwing them up for grabs, and really hurting my fantasy team, guys. That was a bad move by me. But Adam, let's go to you. What was your biggest takeaway from Week 1?
From Week 1, that's a good question. I guess, well, specifically relating, let's say, to the NFC North, one of the divisions that I cover, my biggest takeaway was the Lions' defense looked better than I thought it would, despite the fact they have secondary issues in terms of depth and things like that. I mean, granted, and I don't mean to, hurt you, Andy, or you, Dan. I know you're both Tri-State guys, Giants guys, but we don't really know how good that Giants offense or team is going to be, and they really didn't look good, and we're in a lot of trouble in the preseason the way they looked anyway. So maybe the Lions are beating up on a team that's going to have problems all year, but that stood out to me, and I kind of, Dan, going back to you and even you, Andrew, like, I didn't buy that much into the Bears either, and my biggest takeaway was that I think the Bears are proving to me why I think they're going to be 8-8. I mean, I know you got to pay Jay Cutler because you're not going to get anyone better than him, and if you have a guy like him, at least he can get you 8-8, 10-6, but he's never healthy. He makes dumb decisions. That defense doesn't look good. I think Mark Trestman is great. I think the offensive pieces around Cutler are great, but I think when the defense and your quarterback aren't great, you're going to have problems, and I never bought into them anyways, and that Bills loss told me that. The Packers, who knows? They might be the best team in a week thing. And I liked how Minnesota looked. I don't think St. Louis is going to be that bad, but Minnesota, they look like they're going to be interesting. My biggest takeaways were from the North, because I think for the most part the NFL kind of, with the exception of maybe the Patriots upset, the NFL pretty much played out the way I thought it might in Week 1.
Yeah, I guess the most surprising thing for me when it comes to the NFC East division that I cover is that I wasn't surprised at all about anything. Starting with the Redskins, I saw the problems all preseason with their offensive line from a pass protection standpoint. They resurfaced against the Texans. They couldn't move the ball. There was consistent pressure on RG3, and his footwork looked miserable. You could just guess from a mile away that Keenan Robinson was not going to be the answer at inside linebacker to replace London Fletcher, and Bakari Rambo was not going to be the answer at safety to replace an already weak safety that featured Brandon Merriweather. So they gave up a big play on a bomb to DeAndre Hopkins. So that didn't play out any different than I thought. Dallas defense is the least talented defense that I've ever seen, strictly speaking from a standpoint of me covering the NFL for the past 5 years in depth. So that didn't surprise me at all. What surprised me maybe was how they clamped down in the second half, and Tony Romo just blew it by throwing through so many interceptions. Moving on, I never thought the Giants would have a chance just based on this matchup alone. They lost their left guard, Jeff Schwartz, who was supposed to be their best offensive lineman right before the third preseason game. They're starting a new center who hasn't played football in 2 years, and a right guard who was part of that Bullygate scandal, John Jerry, who wasn't very good to begin with. So it was never a good matchup to go against Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley there, and Ziggy Ansah. And then lastly, the Eagles, they proved last year that they have problems in the back end. That's a defense that's improving, but at the same time, they're not all there yet. So when they went down 17-0 with 2 big plays over the top, that didn't surprise me either, even if it was to the Jaguars. So what surprised me, I would say the most, is that nothing surprised me. This is going to be a bad division, a really bad one.
Yeah, as a Giant fan, I mean, Dan, you can back me up here. Like, it just never, like, even coming into the season, I just never liked what was going on there. I mean, Odell Beckham is talented, I get it, but he was out for 3 weeks before anything even happened. They looked bad in the preseason. I mean, Eli's learning a whole entire new offense for the first time, basically since his rookie year. Their defense isn't great. Their offensive line looked horrible. Then, like as you mentioned, Jeff Schwartz goes out with an injury, who was like their biggest free agent acquisition. I mean, I think they're just going to struggle to even win 5-6 games.
I wouldn't go that far. I think this team will actually improve as the season goes on, and I think I am a little higher on the defense than you are with the additions of Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, Walter Thurman, and getting John Beeson back. The defense made a few great stops. Stafford made a few incredible plays on the run. The first two, and the second touchdown, was just an unbelievable single individual play by him. And I thought Jason Pierre-Paul looked better, not as elite as he once was, but much better than I saw him all last season. So I'm not going to jump the gun yet on that, but I'm going to say in any matchup that they're facing an interior defensive line similar to or better than the Lions, they will lose that game 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah, that Calvin Johnson touchdown to open the game where they lost coverage didn't help either.
Yeah, that's just a classic Perry Fuel zone gone wrong.
Yeah, but Eddie, let me go to you because I actually have a question for you. You cover the NFC West. Were you surprised at how bad the Rams were? Like, granted, okay, they lost Sam Bradford. They were probably going to be like a 500 team with him, but that defense was supposed to be very good this year, and they allowed 34 points to Matt Castle and the Vikings. Granted, the Vikings have Adrian Peterson, Cordarrelle Patterson entering his second year, Greg Jennings, but, like, you know, they weren't supposed to be offensive juggernauts there.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think one thing that we all know is that this is a quarterback league. You know, if you look at who's won the Super Bowl, who's been successful the past decade, it's teams that have good quarterbacks. Your quarterback goes down and you're in big trouble. So I guess from that sense, I'm not really too surprised, especially with Sean Hill, their backup and, you know, presumed starter going forward. He gets knocked out of the game, and, you know, from then on, like, how many NFL teams feel confident bringing in their third, you know, quote unquote third quarterback to win an opening game? That being said, I think it could be a long season for the boys in St. Louis, especially with Chris Long now missing at least 8 to 10 weeks now, it looks like, somewhere in that ballpark. But, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, from everything that I've been reading is that, you know, all things considered, the folks in St. Louis are a little concerned by the performance as well. I mean, obviously, I don't think they were expecting when Sam Bradford went down to be, you know, world beaters and win the Super Bowl, but I still think that even with Sean Hill, and you're right, that defense, they expected to be competitive, and, you know, they just weren't on Sunday. So, yeah, I guess you could say it's a little surprising, you know, even considered the circumstances.
But I think also you could say, since, you know, the Vikings are going to be a nice team, maybe a surprising 6-win team that's like a good, bad team. And the Rams, I don't think are going to get blown out like that again. I think that score could have been an aberration, maybe all piled up on the Rams before they could really get out of a hole. But I think the Rams, even if they lose, aren't going to lose as badly as that, and I don't think the Vikings will be as impressive as that. I think it's indicative of what both teams may be, but I think the score might be a little aberrational in that game, at least.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's only week 1, but granted, because there's only 6 games, there's going to be a lot of overreaction. I mean, we saw that with the Patriots losing to the Dolphins, and we saw that, I mean, granted, I'm a Giants fan, and I'm probably overreacting. I mean, Dan covers it great. You know, if you follow him on Twitter at Dan Schneider, he does a great job just following everything. So, you know, I don't know. He may be higher on them than I will. But anyway, let's look ahead to week 2. Give me, I guess, in each of the 2 divisions that we all cover, give me your biggest games for each division. I mean, you know, well, we're talking about the Rams. They're playing the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers didn't look great. Some of the more marquee matchups, Seahawks-Chargers is an interesting matchup, even Falcons-Bengals. You know, there's a lot of interesting, good type of matchups here. And obviously we got tomorrow night's game, an inter-division game in the AFC North where the Steelers and the Ravens will play each other, coming off this whole entire Ray Rice thing. So, I mean, guys, like, what's the biggest game in each division for you guys? You know, Adam, we can go back to you.
Well, the one I'm most interested in the NFC North is Bears San Francisco. I want to see if the Bears are involved, or at least involving an NFC North team, I should say, because I want to see if that Bears offense can put up points a little more consistently than they did. Granted, I know San Francisco's a good defense, but just see if they can get into a rhythm even against a tough defense. And I want to see if they can improve on the defensive end. I mean, if they look really bad again, then it's going to tell me all I need to know about Chicago. And in terms of the AFC West, another division that I cover, the most interesting game to me involving an NFC West, or involving an AFC West team would be I want to see how the Raiders do this week. I mean, I like the way Derek Carr looked against the Jets, but I want to see how they do this week. I think he could be potentially a star, and if he continues to look as competent and maybe even improves from where he did in the Jets game, maybe the Raiders have something happy going on over there, something good going on over there, I should say.
Dan, what about you? Because, I mean, the NFC East, you know, as you had mentioned in your kind of recap, your most surprising thing or your biggest takeaway from week 1, you know, nothing really surprised you in the NFC East. It kind of seems up in the air for anyone to win. You know, the Eagles won by 17, but that was after being down by 17 to a team that many might say isn't very great in the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I want to see if any of these 0-1 teams can not get to 0-2. I saw a stat today that said that only 12% of the teams who start 0-2 will go on to make the playoffs. So, really, is there going to be any team that can compete for this division besides the Eagles? I think that you're going to see a bounce-back game from the Redskins, and I think that you're going to see a bounce-back game from the Giants. I think both have a very good chance to win just based on the matchups that they both have, but I do not think that the Cowboys are going to get the win in Tennessee. And moving on to the NFC South, I'm going to say the most interesting storyline is, can the Falcons go into Cincinnati and win that game? I personally will be man enough to admit that I pegged the Falcons wrong. I did not think they were going to be a strong team. I hated what they did in the offseason by adding 2 interior linemen in, the guy Solai from Miami, Paul Solai, the nose tackle, and also Tyson Jackson from the Chiefs, another basically a nose tackle. We're trying to fit them into the defense, and they really don't have a pass rush. So I was very surprised to see them beat the Saints, a team I was very high on this year. And really, they just did it all in the hands of Matt Ryan, who spread the ball around, stood tall in the pocket, progressed through all of his reads, and in my opinion, is turning into one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, and I'm willing to go out and say that. So can he carry them into Cincinnati, a very tough team, one of the best teams in the AFC, and win? And if they can get the win, the Falcons, I think they're a real team to watch out for this year.
And what about you? You cover the NFC West, and every team seemed to be pretty darn good and kind of live up to the billing that the NFC West, at least last year, the last couple of years, is the best division in football. This year, we didn't know. Outside of the Rams, everyone's 1-0. What's your biggest storyline, at least in that division?
I think the game that I'm personally just kind of as a fan excited to see is the Seahawks and the Chargers. I think that the Chargers kind of underperformed last week, and the Seahawks is kind of well documented, have their adventures when they go out on the road, and so I'm really interested to see how they do heading into San Diego, and if they can take care of business. I think I don't think anyone is going to be shocked if if they end up going in there and losing a field goal. I don't think so. I think San Diego is going to kind of right the ship at some point this year, and I think that they have a nice little playoff run in them. But and that's one for me that I think has the capabilities of being an interesting game going down to the wire. So I think that in the NFC West is the game for me that I want to keep an eye on. And then in the AFC North, I think it is the game tomorrow night, the Ravens Steelers, and just seeing what happens in the aftermath of this whole Ray Rice situation. And I think those are the two that for me kind of pique my interest, and I think are going to be two really interesting storylines to kind of follow not only tomorrow but kind of throughout the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, and that'll be an interesting game tomorrow night, obviously. Because of obviously because of Ray Rice and Roger Goodell, but also, like you said, they're going to hear so much about Ray Rice, and in a short week after a loss to a division rival, going into another division rival game, it's going to be really tough. And like you had said with the San Francisco 49ers, you can't ignore the off-the-field issues. As for me in the AFC East and South, the biggest game in the AFC East, the Dolphins and Bills are playing, both 1-0, so we'll see who becomes 2-0 and kind of gets an early lead there. But actually the most interesting game to me is the Jets versus the Packers. The Packers are coming off a loss. Granted, it was at Seattle on opening night, but they have to rebound. But the Jets, they're 1-0, high expectations for Rex Ryan. Granted, their secondary looks terrible because of injuries and the fact that John Idzik just didn't really address it in the offseason. But, they beat the Oakland Raiders only 19-14. That was with a rookie quarterback. Oakland's not that good. They got a lot of pieces from all over the place and a lot of veterans, Mar Woodley, Justin Tuck, all these guys in the defensive line. Charles Woodson's still there, and he's just like an ageless wonder. But, Geno Smith was taking big hits. Ground game looks pretty good. But overall, are the Jets going to be for real this year? Even if they lose this game by a touchdown to the Packers, if they can stay tight, I think that's an encouraging sign for the Jets, and that's the biggest takeaway for me. As for the AFC South, the Titans will probably beat the Cowboys, the Jaguars, and Redskins is an interesting matchup, especially if the Jaguars win. But I'm probably going to go with the Monday night game, the Colts versus the Eagles. The Colts are coming off a loss where they kind of came back. and they're playing the Eagles, who, are probably going to be one of the better teams in the NFC. Everyone predicts them by default to win the NFC East. But let's see how that line holds up against the Philadelphia defense. Granted, Philadelphia's defense isn't that great, but they do have some pass rushers, and there are a lot of issues on the offensive line. Trent Richardson only got the ball 6 times last week after they said, we love Trent Richardson. He's looking great. He's learning the playbook and all this stuff during the offseason, then they barely feature him. Andrew Luck, is he going to be considered the best quarterback by year's end? Who knows? I mean, it's an interesting storyline from there. So let's go really quickly before we wrap it up, because I know guys got to go. Give me if we're talking fast forward, looking ahead to next week, what's the one biggest thing we're still going to be talking about really quickly?
I think that we're going to still be talking about what's going to happen with these with the suspensions. We've got guys like Josh Gordon and Wes Welker who have suspensions, but when they come to this new agreement, or this proposed new agreement, you might see these suspensions reversed, and they're going to have people fumbling around saying Wes Welker's back on the field, Josh Gordon's back on the field. It's going to change the entire landscape of the NFL. You may even have some other guys who are suspended that really can make an impact this year. So I think that's an interesting thing, and next week we're going to have a lot more clarity on it.
I think kind of a more on the field thing. I think something that we'll be, talking about, but would be definitely something to keep an eye on is who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Rams going forward. I know Jeff Fisher's kind of thrown his support behind Sean Hill and said he's the guy if he's healthy, and so there's always the if he's healthy. So if he's not healthy, then who is the guy in St. Louis? And I think it's definitely something we'll be wanting to keep an eye on going forward.
I like, Eddie, that you wanted to keep it on the field. I'm not really sure how these games are going to pan out on the field, and I think that this Ray Rice thing is just kind of taking everything over, and the Josh Gordon suspension, and even the league now re-looking at its marijuana policy, yada, yada. I think the biggest thing that we're going to still be talking about after week 2 is if there is any fallout about Goodell, that, as well as Dan was mentioning, suspensions, and is the landscape of the league changing? At least for now, early on, I think it's going to be off the field for now.
If I had to go on the field, I'm going to say that New York is going to overreact this week. Again, the Giants are playing the Cardinals. I think they're going to lose, and I think the Jets are going to look bad against the Packers. And, everyone's going to be calling for Rex Ryan's head after beating the Raiders this week. So New York's going to be all over the place off the field. Somewhat of a bold prediction. I know, Dan, you had said that there are, Roger Goodell's faced pressure, and, he's kind of sidestepped it a lot and gone through the face of adversity. But I think we may be looking at a new owner soon, at least, very, very close next week. But, yeah,
I agree with you.
My biggest thing. So, great second episode, guys. It's nice to have everyone on and actually see your faces, because we only talk on conference calls where we awkwardly interrupt each other. So now we're just awkwardly interrupting each other via a camera and a podcast. So great second episode. For those of us who listen, thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. You can tweet at us again at Blue Collar God for Adam Levin, at Dan Schneier NFL for Dan, at Eddie Paskal for Eddie, and at Goldberg for myself, Andrew Goldberg. I hope everyone has a good Wednesday night. Try to actually enjoy the on-field stuff on the NFL for a little bit starting tomorrow night and going ahead to the weekend. And, guys, have a good weekend.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, boy.
All right, later, guys.